everybody, Don Murray here with your TVN Severe Weather Recap. It is Tuesday, July 14th, 2015. We'll be recapping the severe weather event that occurred yesterday here across parts of the Great Lakes, extending down here through parts of the Appalachians and extending further to the southeast across parts of the eastern Carolinas. The first severe weather event that I want to talk about here was in parts of the southern plains here right around Hutchinson, Kansas. And this was probably where the most photogenic storm of the day occurred yesterday here in south central Kansas. We can actually zoom into that area and get a better look at some of these storm reports, and then we'll get into what exactly occurred with this. So you see here just to the north and west of Hutchinson, Kansas, you see all these large hail reports here, these detections. We have a 1-inch hail detection here, or at the spotter report, and then we have a 2-inch hail detection. You can see this storm path progress from southwest to northeast, but you see all these tornado icons. These are tornado reports, and there was actually a very photogenic tornado here. One person actually shot this tornado from a drone. Let's go ahead and take a look at that video right here. You see this very impressive tornado. Now, while most storm chasers had their main focus on parts of north central Illinois, some chasers that hung around the southern plains got treated to this. And we had a lot of other pictures from residents that were putting this on social media. So social media was blowing up with this tornado last night, to the surprise of many chasers. So that was that storm there in south central Kansas last evening. So let's go ahead and take a look at the view and take a look at the Midwest and see how the rest of the day evolved. Zoom that back out there. There we go. So early in the day we had a line of strong to severe thunderstorms that developed here across parts of the upper Midwest Sunday evening, and this progressed through the overnight hours and through parts of the western lakes here across parts of southern Wisconsin. Let's actually zoom in here. This line continued through the Chicago metro area. Around 7 a.m. this impacted the Chicago area, and then it kind of faded out as the instability was the lowest early in the morning. So this line kind of deteriorated in strength as it crossed through parts of northern Indiana, but as it started encountering the daytime heating, it started to re-intensify just around Indianapolis and then point south. So you can take a look at all these wind damage reports as it continued to move further to the south and east here across parts of the Ohio Valley and extending further to the southeast across parts of the Appalachians, and even further to the south here in the parts of the Carolinas in the late evening hours. You can see a lot of these wind damage reports and even some of the large hail detections here across parts of the Carolinas. So that was a very interesting scenario with this line is continuing a long track squall line moving through. Some would call that a derecho. In some respects it was somewhat similar, but it didn't quite meet the criteria for a derecho all the way down the line. However, that is pretty much the general premise of what a derecho is: a long track squall line that produces damage through hundreds of miles in one continuous path. There was one other interesting storm I wanted to talk about with this. It actually kind of broke off from this main line. It was on the back edge of the outflow and created a very powerful supercell here across parts of south central Kentucky, and this thing just went diving straight south. Now, one thing I want to point out with storms like this, you see the average flow of the storms will here from northwest to southeast, but this one kind of took on a life of its own. When you start to see these storms and they start to root and go their own way, this is meaning it's tapping into the atmosphere and grabbing onto its full potential. And what this did is it turned into a very powerful supercell. Numerous tornado warnings with this. Now, there weren't any official reports of tornadoes with this. However, the velocity was almost maxed out at this at one point, so I would not be surprised if this is just in a really rural area and we just didn't have any reports. But a lot of wind damage reports along this path and a lot of large hail detection. So there may be some surveys being conducted with this storm. However, still no official reports of tornadoes with that storm, but very impressive supercell that occurred with that. Now let's go ahead and take a look further to the north, because that was part one of the event. And then we had another event here as this system continued to progress south and east, so leaving out outflow boundaries, and one extending from the southeast to the northwest. There was an outflow boundary that was laying out across parts of Indiana and Illinois. So there was an outflow boundary that was being laid out from that squall line that was pushing further to the south and east across parts of the Ohio Valley and the Appalachians. Extreme instability developed here across parts of Illinois and Indiana, and even here across parts of Iowa, up to 7,500 joules of CAPE, and CAPE is the convective available potential energy, just an indice that we meteorologists look for how unstable the atmosphere was, and that kind of number is extremely high. Even in July standards, that's a very high instability value. But very rarely do you get it to where it matches up with the upper level dynamics. And yesterday was a rare case, especially for July, where those actually lined up. Problem was the low-level shear, it just wasn't there. These storms were rotating here across parts of Iowa and Illinois and even into Indiana. Several tornado warnings here, especially here across parts of west central Indiana. There were many tornado warnings. However, there were no tornado reports that at least I saw yesterday, and I don't think there were any confirmed tornadoes out of yesterday's event. So while the conditions were, they almost came together, but not quite, but definitely there for wind damage and large hail. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of these storms here. So let's zoom in. You can see a lot of these large hail paths here. You see one supercell here that progressed to the south here. And look at all these large hail detections here, up to 2 inches just west of Chicago. And then look at the south side of Chicago here. You see this one storm here that crossed right on the south side of the city. You see some 2-inch detections. And then right along the border here, just in the Indiana, northwest Indiana, the Gary area, we had a 2 3/4 inch hail report from a spotter. And then looking at some of these other storms here, see a lot of these clusterings here around Ottawa, Illinois, and extending further to the south and east, some very large hail detections. And then even further to the west, initially these storms started developing here across parts of Iowa, and you can see some of these paths here, these large hail detections and some of the spotter reports of large hail. And then there was one other storm. It developed the mid to late afternoon hours. This developed here across parts up north. Let's see here. Make sure I get my geography right there. There we go. Across parts of extreme northwestern Missouri. And the storm tracked east and then started veering a little bit to the south and east as it crossed into parts of Illinois. But definitely some large hail and damaging winds there across parts of Missouri and northern Missouri yesterday. So that was yesterday, a very interesting severe weather day. Probably one of the more notable severe weather days of the year. We had well over 500 reports of wind damage yesterday, so definitely very active. But it continues into today, so let's go ahead and take a look at the severe weather outlook. And we can pull this up here. Here is today's severe weather outlook. This is via the Storm Prediction Center, and this actually extends a little further to the north here now. We do have a severe thunderstorm watch across parts of Ohio. But you can see we do have a slight risk that encompasses the Ohio Valley, extending down here through parts of the Carolinas and even coming down here to as far southwest as Birmingham and as far southeast as Savannah, Georgia. But the primary severe weather threat today is going to be here across parts of the Tennessee Valley here, from the southern Ohio Valley extending down here across parts of central Tennessee into parts of the Piedmont, extending further to the east here across parts of the Carolinas. The primary severe weather threats today are going to be damaging winds, maybe winds in excess of 70 miles an hour, some large hail threat primarily, well, the largest hail primarily here across parts of central Tennessee, extending north here across parts of Kentucky and into parts of southern Ohio. And then there is even a tornado threat. It's not a high tornado threat, however, I would not be surprised to see a couple tornado reports here across parts of the Ohio Valley, extending down here to parts of the Tennessee Valley. So I'll be watching those TVN live streamers. I'll actually be out there live streaming this afternoon here across parts of the southern Appalachians and coming up here across parts of southern Tennessee. So I'll be looking out for myself live streaming, and also there'll be some other live streamers out here across parts of the Ohio Valley. So thanks for watching this TVN Severe Weather Recap, and we'll be recapping whatever happens today, tomorrow on our TVN Severe Weather Recap. Thank you.
Don't forget to check out Storm Chasers streaming live at tvnweather.com/live. Or if you're on the go, you can watch live Storm Chasers streaming on your mobile device by downloading the TVN Weather app on your Android or iOS device.